In this video, we will show you how to replace your transmission shift solenoid on this Ford Ranger. This will be located inside of your transmission, behind your transmission pan. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Make your way under the hood. You're going to be looking for your transmission dipstick. As you pull the dipstick up and out, you're going to see exactly what type of fluid to use. It says to use Mercon 5. With that said, make sure you have that fluid available. We'll remove the dipstick and set it aside. Once you've done that, carefully make your way under the vehicle. Now from underneath the vehicle, we'll be looking for our transmission pan. That's this right here. You're going to find that you have 18 bolts that make their way all the way around the transmission pan, holding it up to the transmission. Inside of this area, your transmission fluid is located. You want to make sure you have a collection bucket under this area and hand and eye protection at all times. Before we go ahead and start taking anything down, let's make sure we clean up any of this area that might have rust or debris. We don't want anything to fall into the transmission system. Once you have that clean, we can start removing the transmission bolts. As I mentioned, there is a lot of fluid inside of the transmission. Let's make sure that we remove these in a way that we can divert the fluid down into our bucket and not necessarily have to worry about it coming out everywhere. We'll use an 8mm to loosen these bolts. Loosen the first couple bolts here. Now since this is the corner that I want the fluid to start coming out, I'll make sure that I have the bolts progressively looser towards this side. I'm going to fully remove the ones at the far end, but we'll continue loosening them as we make our way across, allowing the fluid to make its way out towards the front corner. At this point, I'll let this drain until it stops dripping. Now this slowed down quite a bit. We'll continue on. More fluid will continue coming out. Just be careful along the way. All right, at this point, we'll fully take out our bolts. This one in here for now. Leave this one here. At this point, I only have 2 bolts holding this pan to the transmission. We'll continue on by holding onto the pan while we finish removing each of the 2 bolts. After we've done that, we'll lower the pan down and recycle that fluid properly. At this point, you want to make sure you clean and inspect your transmission pan. Make sure it's still in good reusable condition and not rotted or damaged in any way. We'll set this aside. We'll use an 8mm to take down this filter. Commonly, it is a good idea to replace the transmission filter and gasket at the same time as doing this job. Use a clean rag and give the area a quick wipe. Make sure not to get any miscellaneous debris in this area, and definitely do not use any parts cleaner. At this point, let's disconnect our electrical connectors to each one of our shift solenoids. A quick inspection. Get this one out of here as well. Set the wiring harness aside. Now we can start removing our mounting bracket. This is held in place with 3 10mm headed mounting bolts. Go ahead and remove all 3 of those bolts and the bracket. A quick inspection and set it all aside. Now keep in mind, as you remove the bolts and the bracket, you do want to hold onto those shift solenoids so they don't come pulling out on you. Take hold of that bracket. Quick inspection. Take hold of the shift solenoid and remove it from the transmission. Give it a little wiggle here. And there it is, friend. Let's get ready to install our brand new shift solenoid. Have it in the proper orientation with the electrical connector facing downward. We'll take this and press it into the transmission. Now while holding it there, you'd want to continue on with the bracket. Keep in mind, if you are replacing both of those shift solenoids, now's the time to replace the other one. The process is the same. Go ahead and take hold of it and pull it out of place. Once you're sure that you have both of those in place, we'll continue on with the bracket. You want to make sure you have it in the proper orientation. The way you can tell is with this center hole here. It has an area that protrudes out a little bit. We want to have that facing towards the center of the vehicle. Now when we bring this in, pay attention to where it connects onto each one of the transmission shift solenoids. It will have a small hooked area. It needs to go over the solenoid, holding it in place. If your solenoid is not pushed in far enough, you might just be hooked onto the transmission, not holding the solenoid in, and when you drive down the road, this might potentially come popping out of there. We'll pay close attention to that. Now that we have everything lined up, we can continue on with our mounting bolts. You'll find that you have 2 longer bolts and 1 short bolt. The short bolt is the center bolt. Once you have all of them started, you can go ahead and bottom them out and then torque them to 89 inch-pounds. Double check to make sure you're seated properly, and then you can continue on to each of your electrical connectors. We'll carefully take this and put it in place. Slide in each one of those connectors, give them a light tug to make sure they're completely secured. Now that we've confirmed that, let's continue on with our transmission filter. As I had mentioned, it's always a good idea to go ahead and replace your transmission filter when you're doing this service. If you're not planning on replacing it, you do want to give it a close inspection. The areas that you want to pay attention are the 2 ports. You'll find that you have an O-ring. There's one here, and there's one down at the far side there. We'll just give them a close inspection, make sure they are reusable. Go ahead and take this filter and put it up in place. Once you've done that, continue with putting in your mounting bolt. Start it in, snug it up, torque it to 89 inch-pounds. At this point, it's time to prepare the transmission pan and your mounting bolts. As far as the pan itself, make sure you clean the mating surface so it's a nice smooth surface. As for the mounting bolts, go ahead and clean up the threaded area and make sure they are in reusable condition. Once you've done so, we'll take the pan, the gasket, and put it all in place. Hold it in there with those bolts. Once you have them snugged up, torque those to 89 inch-pounds. Let's give this a quick wipe real quick. When you put your transmission pan in place, it's a good idea to start in all of the mounting bolts before you tighten any of them. Now that we have them all started, we can go ahead and snug them up and then we'll torque them to that 89 inch-pounds as I had mentioned. And for good measure, we'll just go around one more time. Once you've gone around and torqued each one of these bolts to the proper specification, go ahead and clean up any mess that's in this area, and then you can safely make your way out from under the vehicle. Back up in the engine compartment, let's use a funnel in that transmission dipstick tube. You want to make sure it's nice and clean. This is where we're going to add our brand new transmission fluid. Before we start adding the manufacturer specified fluid, let's have a quick look at the transmission dipstick itself. Turn this over real quick. Now looking where my thumb is, you can see that there's a small hatched area. Heading towards the very tip of the dipstick, you're also going to find that you have two small dots. You want your engine oil level to be someplace inside of this area where the hatches are. If it's in where the dots are, that means you have to add a little bit. If it's below that lowest dot, that means you have an issue. Now with that said, we're going to add approximately 5 quarts of the manufacturer transmission fluid and get it up into this area. Once we've done that, we'll continue on by starting up the vehicle, run it through each of the gears, pausing in between. Eventually, we'll stop in the park position and we'll make our way back out here and check the transmission fluid level with the dipstick. You want to make sure you do this nice and slow. As fluid makes its way down the dipstick, air will be trying to make its way up, causing air bubbles, and that could cause it to burp out. Let's just finish putting this last quart in here. Let's wipe off our transmission dipstick. We can take this and slide it into the transmission dipstick tube. Bring it all the way down. At this point, as I had mentioned, we're going to start up the vehicle. We want to let it run for a little while and let it get up to operating temperature. While it's doing that, we're going to run it through each of the gears, pausing in between each one of them. Once we make our way all the way back to park and the vehicle is at normal operating temperature on a flat level surface, check that transmission fluid level. All right, we've got the vehicle running. Let's pull this transmission dipstick out of here. Just gonna give it a close inspection. At normal operating temperature, I'm right up inside the hatches here. If the fluid was cold, we'd want to be right at this lower dot. As you can tell, this fluid level is perfect. At this point, you want to go ahead and reinstall that dipstick, close the hood, take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.